Hi folks, MasakoX here. These two beings who look very similar should meet, right? Well, should they? We've explained it a few times in each part, but let me give you the short gist of it if you're new to this. It's simply down to Bardock's sheer apathy for sentimentality and relationships, except towards Gine, and Goku's lack of understanding or interest in his heritage before Grandpa Gohan. Goku felt like he should revive his father, but his father had nothing left to live for. Now that many of his urges and drives and things that he knew about were either gone, irrelevant, or had changed beyond recognition. Can something be retrieved from all of this? Well, let's resume. Once the festivities of the post-Beerus encounter and birthday had subsided, everyone went their separate ways. It had been a good day, mostly, save from Earth almost being erased, but this being the Dragon Team, that wasn't the most outrageous thing that had darkened their doorsteps. Things were also hopefully looking up for Bardock's place within the group. He had aided his son and was more of a team player than he'd ever displayed in his time on Earth, just staying for the party. I mean, it was not really much to brag about, but it was a thing. However, as time passed, Bardock's form sadly returned to its status quo. He was slowly withdrawing from everyone again, and as you may be fully aware, that was really not a surprise, since he didn't really spend much time around them in the first place. But this time, the second time, it hit the team even harder. They thought they'd gotten somewhere with Bardock, finally, maybe rekindled the spark for life. But alas, not even the advent of the Super Saiyan God could get him excited. It was just another case of, neat. What now? It was getting a little tedious, honestly. As expected, he wanted to return to King Kai's place, with the hope of seeing Gine from time to time and being able to do, well, anything really, on his terms. It's like what Chi-Chi had said in Part 5. Bardock may have been revived physically, but his soul was very much rooted in the other world. Like Gine's soul was rooted there, like how she didn't want to be revived. She was happy where she was. Nothing could change that really, unless it came from Bardock. But, and this is something that you could describe as progress, the Saiyan knew that after the whole godly display from his son, that he owed his extended family at least some kind of things to appear content whenever he did turn up. So he would assist them from time to time. Chi-Chi needed some lumber gathered? No need to Sengoten. Done. Someone needed any kind of heavy lifting? Done. It was like a checklist of Bardock. He didn't find any sense of satisfaction in doing any of these chores. He just felt obligated to do them. Families help each other out, right? So do that. Seemed like he begrudgingly had accepted his fate, that he was going to have to play nice with his Earth family to some degree. And as such, the months continued to pass, and in May of age 780, his great-granddaughter Pan was born. This was a bit of a shock for Bardock. After all, since Fidel wasn't needed for the ritual, the news about her pregnancy had been delayed. They didn't find out at the birthday party. The kid was, apparently, from what he could gather, quite strong already, and she was still in nappies. Even as a mewling whelp, she was stronger than most folk were just a couple of decades ago, and he would be lying to himself if he said that he didn't care about this event at all. His bloodline had been successfully maintained for yet another generation, and this one was a very potent example of it. His lineage was still going strong. Good, he thought. Even after having been further mixed with human DNA, they were still going strong nonetheless. Much more than could be said for practically any other Saiyan family, apart from Vegeta's. He liked the name Pan, it had a good ring to it. It was simple, short, and functional. So it was a bit of a surprise for Bardock that after 3 months from Pan's birth, he had been invited over to Gohan and Fidel's house. He had finally cared enough to remember her name so that he could meet his great-granddaughter. And although he wasn't present for the direct invitation, he could imagine them gossiping as they sent it. Are you sure this is a good idea, Gohan? I don't think he would care very much, and he might upset the baby, which would not stop me from punching him in the face. Fidel was full of worries. Honey, I don't think he'd do such a thing. I think he would find pride in that his lineage is still going. I mean, who would even want to upset Pan? Besides, if he tries anything, we'll put him in his place. Together. Bardock was being watched closely throughout all of it. He understood why, though, but that didn't mean he had to like it. Were they that jaded of him? Besides, Gohan's house was too cushy for his liking. Kakarot and Chi-Chi valued a simple life, despite the latter being a princess, as he recently learned, which was something that sort of impressed Bardock. He didn't hate it. Gohan's pad, though? Oh, this was definitely excessive. Especially with the number of books lying around the place. Who would even read that many? What for? To Bardock, all these tomes were more useful as fuel for a hot, hot fire. He also knew that behind the welcoming gaze of Videl, there laid a fierce warrior, currently dormant because, she'd just given birth to someone, but ready to strike if anything were to endanger her or her husband, which he could respect. He knew that Videl's fire had not been fully extinguished yet, despite the maternal drapery. Also, the Namekian was one of the least annoying companions of Kakarot. He never spoke when he wasn't spoken to. A nice change of pace after all those chirpy, happy-go-lucky people. And even though they really never conversed with one another, there was sort of a mutual, "Sup, you alright?" Good. Bardock liked that. Bardock didn't need to be well-versed in intersocial relationships to realize that Piccolo here was basically considered part of the family. From what he learned from Chi-Chi, Piccolo was also Gohan's mentor. Originally, his daughter-in-law had some objections and considered him a bad influence, but she quickly learned to appreciate him and considered him now to be a more responsible being. In fact, sometimes more responsible than her own husband. Bardock wouldn't call his younger son, or himself for that matter, a responsible person. It's not how Saiyans were built to be, how to operate. Half Saiyans, though, seem to be better at that sort of thing. If this is how Saiyan blood would survive, then so be it. Not ideal, but sufficient. Gohan was still unbearably boring, though, but good for him, I guess, that he had a kid, that he survived. Bardock had a good deep thought about this, and he then comprehended one thing. If being this strong, though according to a brief conversation he had with the Namekian, Gohan had been kind of slacking on his training lately, wasn't alluring enough for Gohan to focus entirely on in becoming a fighter, then fine, let the man be who he wanted to be. He didn't really care. What he did for a living was entirely alien to Bardock, but the outside pressure of Vegeta and the others trying to force him into adapting into a fighter role was even more irritating after he realized all of this. The prince himself told him that they were no longer on planet Vegeta, so it was a bit hypocritical to expect Gohan to suddenly act like a full-blooded Saiyan born only to fight, since they were living somewhere else, and maybe it worked better for him that he wasn't. He seemed content with his existence right now, and while it wasn't Bardock's kind of lifestyle, as long as it wasn't boring him to death, just let him live his best life or something. Even if this life was buried mostly in books. But now the time had come to finally meet Pan. At first, it wasn't anything special. Saiyan babies and human babies were pretty similar. But it was also weird to see them letting the kids develop outside the nursing capsules. Like how it used to be on planet Vegeta, before technology got in the way and made the whole thing more clinical. Videl had to physically give birth to this thing, which in Bardock's mind was already a mark of a true warrior. He could only imagine Guinea's anger at him had he demanded such a feat of her, but deep down, she probably would have still done it for him. But it wouldn't have been fun for either of them to experience. But the little one, much to his relief and astonishment, seemed to actually enjoy his company. She would smile at him. Apparently, she just learned how to smile and laugh. He had heard Videl mentioning Kakarot and her dad coming here quite often, and would make funny faces at her. That's probably why she was happy to see him. Association. He looked just like her dear old grandpa. But Bardock here wouldn't be making an idiot out of himself. But he did find this little creature in the crib weirdly wholesome. Maybe that organic birthing method wasn't all that bad. Because of that, it left one with more of an attachment to the Sprog. Hey, what's up, you little space tadpole? I guess I'm your great-grandfather. The other guy doesn't have a scar. See? Pan raised her little hands, as if she wanted to examine it more closely. Bardock reluctantly leaned over so the baby could have a look. She wasn't scared. With her little hands, she ran them over this weird new thing. She probably never had seen or felt stuff like this before. He realized that despite what he had been told about human babies, this one was still part Saiyan and still developing slightly faster than the norm. Maybe not as fast as a full Saiyan baby, but she still understood more than Gohan, Videl, or the Namekian understood themselves. Hey, do you want to hear how Great-Grandpa got this? He sat down next to the crib, Videl looking a little worried, but Pan's eyes were shining with curiosity over this new person. She wasn't scared, she was thrilled, so okay, roll with it. It was a long time ago, when I was part of an invading force. Bardock was never the one to tell stories to his children. He knew that some cultures did this. Heck, he even saw Guinea talking to Raditz's or Kakarot's pods, telling them about her day and adventures of their dad. But it wasn't something that he would do himself. But in this case, he couldn't stop himself. It was like a part of his brain had just been unlocked. That it felt okay to be this vulnerable and open about oneself to somebody else. Videl and Gohan would stay with him, but after several minutes of this, they felt comfortable enough to leave him alone with the baby. But Bardock felt compelled to keep talking to her, to finally tell his story to someone. He hadn't done this with Kakarot, Gohan, or Goten. He hadn't told his story to anyone. Not really, not even to Gine. But this little creature was just listening, hardly making any sound. It was almost as if she was actively taking all of this in, committing it to memory. It was honestly, miraculously focused on him. And he knew that she wouldn't judge him. He knew that he was doing this mostly for himself, yeah, but it still felt cathartic to finally talk about all of this, to finally let it out. He didn't realize that when he had finished, it had already gone dark. And cereal, Pan, you had to be there. I thought I was getting soft or something, but I couldn't leave this kid and his mother to die. Where was the honor in that? Yeah, I know. Pan giggled happily at being acknowledged. Bardock smiled for the first time in a long while. He smiled a genuine smile. Later on, Gohan had found Bardock asleep next to his daughter's crib, with Pan sleeping inside, but close to him. He smirked and put a warm blanket around his grandfather. He liked being right. In the morning, Bardock was slightly embarrassed about having a blanket over him. Somebody had seen him. But he would eat breakfast with them before Gohan then had to go to work. The older Saiyan soon was heading for home himself, but decided to walk with his grandson before heading back to his temporary locum. I see you enjoyed your time with Pan. Bardock shrugged. Kid's a good listener. Took after a great-grandmother. Would you tell us about her sometime? We're all curious. Bardock paused for a while and looked at Gohan. One day, maybe she'll tell you herself. Awesome. Thanks, grandfather. Have a nice day. Gohan shook his hand and went towards his college, where he was about to give a speech. Gohan? Yeah? Don't let the kid down. And with that, he just flew away. Oh, okay. All right. Good experience. Good talk. At that moment, something occurred to Bardock. What if the problem wasn't them? Their insane way of life, their annoying chirpy enthusiasm? Maybe, though, the problem laid with him. He was the kind of person who had seen a lifetime of combat, and no amount of training could change that. He had been bred to be a killing machine, and he could not change that either. But all of them weren't that. He remembered all of those invasions, how unnecessary killing civilians felt. In his mind, there was no honor in that, but he always considered them a different class of people. That's what he would tell himself to cope. But now, being around his extended family some more, he started to get that they have lives just like those people, and that he was the odd one out, not them. And he could pretend that everything was okay, but it wasn't really. At the end of the day, though, it wasn't their fault. It's just how things were. Soon after Bardock finally returned to King Kai's place, he went to visit Gine to tell her about Pan. She was understandably thrilled to learn of having a great-granddaughter. Oh, that's precious! I hope she'll grow up to be big and strong. She already seems tougher than her old man, but I suspect it's because of Vidal's genes. You'd like her. Gine smirked. I know how this sounds, but I can't wait until I get to meet them. Bardock laughed. Hey, let's not put a death wish on them just yet, huh? Well, how about you? What do you mean? Bardock felt flustered. I hope you got rid of that death wish of yours. He didn't want to tell her the whole truth. He was long considering what he should do, so he deflected her question with some reminiscing of the old days and mentioning how pale Gohan was after hearing some of the war stories that he had told Pan. Gine wasn't happy that he was avoiding the truth though, but she didn't push. She was a good listener, like Pan had just been. Still though, he could not stay here for long, so he returned to King Kai again. More months passed. Bardock was kind of stuck between Earth and the other world. It became more annoying due to Kakarot being unable to pick him up on demand. Apparently he'd started to train with Beerus's angelic manservant or something, although Bardock wasn't so sure who really was the manservant in that relationship. But one day, when he was on his way to Earth, he learned of some rather dire news. A while ago, Vegeta's wife discovered that someone other than them had used the Dragon Balls, and they finally learned what they were used for. It seemed that another relic of the past, just like him and Gine, had been wished back to life and was on course for Earth. Frieza was back. And although Bardock knew that his relatives should be most likely stronger than him, this encounter would finally give him a real fight and some much needed closure. At last, he had something to live for. And that's where we're going to be leaving things for right now.